Hi, hi. Last video, ha, last video was interesting. I was quoting David Lynch. I love that guy. And he basically says something along the lines, nothing is ever really perfect, but if it's finished and it feels complete, then it opens the door to the future. And I ended up with like a beautiful statement, or at least I think it's beautiful. I don't know about you guys, man, but some of you watched the whole video, so peace. I love you. I love you. And you are awesome. I think awesome is like this or like this. I'm not sure. I'll Google that shit. But so I ended with a note that I actually wrote for a later video, which is like being present is allowing yourself the chance to leave your thoughts to only exist in their own environment. As in every step has its own attention and every setup has its own attention needs. Now, moving forward, the video right now is basically a difference between self-actualization and self-realization. So self-actualization is scientific, testing, feedback, experimental. Self-realization is spiritual, connecting to the self, listening to yourself for the better understanding of yourself. Self. Well, I have my own like reasoning behind self-actualization and self-realization. And I think people kind of like are required to do both, but it's a lot easier to approach it from the outside because let's face it, our triggers are external. So here we go. Self-actualization is to self-actualize is scientific, testing, feedback, experimental, and self-realization is spiritual because here it connects to the self, listen to yourself for a better understanding of yourself. Yay! The key is the scientific approach to self-actualization and the spiritual approach. We always we're I'm like again like I don't know what kind of videos you watch or what kind of thoughts you have or but from an emotional perspective, most of the time it's our interaction with people that kind of like make us see something. So I had this conversation once with my family, and they were like, "We raised you," and I don't like that because like I don't think parents raise us. I think when you're not looking at your parent as a parent is when you kind of like are able to engage with them differently and be raised through them. I think our family, our friends, I think our acquaintances are what raise us. Because effectively, what I'm doing is I'm moving, I'm doing stuff around people that I care to get their opinion, maybe, or I care to have them in my life. And what happens is if I do something off, for example, I'm like right now, a memory of me just kind of like being an asshole to a friend of mine. And what she did was she kind of got upset, and from there I realized that that is me being an asshole. So what I did was kind of like started not acting that kind of way. Doesn't mean I'm not an asshole. It just means that I was aware and I started approaching things and attempting different ways to express myself in order for me not to kind of like hurt them. So for me, that's raising. A child is raised by the people that are actually like that he's directly or he's because I'm a dude. He's actually engaging. So that act of self-actualization, even in psychology, is basically just like reflecting on how what you're doing is impacting the other side, the external side. And that's where you kind of like get feedback from it. It could be very much testing. Like socially, you can always like test stuff. And you can look at yourself and be like, no, okay, I'm gonna try this today and kind of like measure if it works or not and be objective enough. Ah, again, objectivity is very much from my perspective psychopathy because like you're not really approaching things from an emotional perspective, which is basically being a psychopath. But the truth is you have to be very it's like it depends on what you want, and most of the time you're always kind of like met with emotions that you don't really like know how to handle because you never explored them from an objective standpoint. So self-actualization allows you to kind of create that distance through the scientific method and just interact back and forth with whatever it is that you're trying to like achieve and using the outside world as a basically scope of references, like a lot of references. And that's basically how you understand yourself. While self-realization is a direct engagement with your own thoughts. Much harder, simply because you you kind of have to build that experience on your own. It's very much a personal experience. You have to build it on your own, and you have to separate yourself in a way because like you have an image of yourself that I think should be changing all the fucking time. But the one thing we do as human beings is we kind of like apply something that we figured out, and we avoid everything that doesn't really like support it, or at the very least, like just like, I don't change, right? Like it's just everything is always changing, but like it's frustrating to keep up maybe, or just kind of like the reason it's frustrating to keep up is because you have a certain image of it. And then you can only kind of like realize it's changed when there's a big deviation from what you initially started with and where it is. So the self-realization part is a spiritual aspect because you kind of have to like look at yourself from the outside and be able to just use that, well, as a self-actualization method, I guess. You could, because like you're looking at yourself and you're kind of like asking yourself questions or just engaging with yourself a certain kind of way. It's just to build that connection that you normally like. I gave the experiment of a friend, right? Because like I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't want to like her to be upset when she's around me, and just kind of like didn't like how it felt. So it's self-actualized in me being a bit nicer, or me a bit my honesty being not that brutal, or my cuntiness just being less dramatic. Because like we really grow up watching movies, and the movies that catch our eyes are the ones that are like extravagant. So we try our best like not to be just, I don't know, uh, subtle is the word I want to use, not normal, subtle. So it's like connecting to yourself. It's the same way as like if you're using self-actualization to connect with people, you're reflecting on your image of them and how they're trying to express their true image. So there's that distinguished relationship between what you think you see in them and what they're trying to show you. And that's how you're building the connection. And it's almost the same when it comes to you, but one is external and the other one is you're the one inside, and then there's the outside world. And then basically we could use the mind as the medium because the mind creates the image of the outside world and of yourself. So you are using your mind to connect with the outside world. That's self-actualization. You are using your mind to connect with your inside world. Is self-realization. Because what you're connecting is to the core of, I don't know why you exist, why you breathe, why blood flows through you, why you have energy to spend, and basically like physical energy. Let's just stick to that instead of us kind of overwhelming ourselves on this topic. And there's a certain like understanding. It's just like that is built slowly because like just like every single interaction you have with people is a realization. Same, every interaction you have with yourself is also a realization. But again, like your image of yourself is ingrained not from the outside in, but from within. So since you kind of like I think we miss out on our own basic experience by allowing me, myself, and I, like the mind, the body, and the soul, to kind of like feel like one. They are one, but each of them is representing a different aspect of this one. And their combination is basically who we are. So self-realization part is a bit more not tricky, but like it's genuinely an open exploration towards how we interact with ourselves that is reflected on the outside world. While self-actualization is basically how we act with the outside world that's reflected on ourselves. We see ourselves in the outside world as we actualize. When it comes to the inside world, we see, what do we see? We see the separation of us. We see the separation of these things. We see the separation of the mind, the body, and the kind of spirit that's observing everything and kind of like agreeing or disagreeing. And creating this dynamic where like the mind is kind of split from the body and the body is split from the soul and the soul is split from the actual mind. But these three are connected to each other. actually kind of creates a certain, like, it gives you a chance to approach, again, like experimentally, because self-actualization is like testing feedback and experimentally. The self-realization is these three, Rishi Devata Chandas. And basically, that's basically the knower, the known, and whatever is being known. The knower, so, like you see, the minute you see yourself, you're able to see yourself. That's a separation. But now, so there's you that's seeing, and then there's what is being seen. And then the results of this dynamic is basically the center. And it's basically the soul basically seeing the body, and the center is basically the mind that kind of connects these two. And effectively, that's consciousness at a level that allows us, that opens a door for us to be able to engage with it in a, it's not a profound way, but a simpler way. It allows us to engage with how we connect to consciousness and how we play our parts with it. And so that's self-realization for me. And it's a video. What do you guys think? Peace out.